It was a weekend just like countless others. The usual group of friends had plans to meet at Cody's house before heading out for drinks. This was after college, when we were all around 23 or 24 years old. Cody's place had always been our go-to gathering spot. His parents were easygoing, and he had a finished basement where we could hang out, drink, and play games without disturbing anyone upstairs. That night, it was just the four of us: Cody, Randy, Jake, and me. After a couple of drinks at his house, we called an Uber and headed out to hit a few local bars. The night followed the typical pattern, starting at a dive bar, moving to another, and eventually ending up at a crowded dance bar. After several hours of drinking, Cody and I decided to head back to his place earlier than Randy and Jake. We were exhausted and just wanted to sleep. Cody ordered another Uber and offered me the pull-out couch in the basement once we got back. When we arrived, Cody followed me downstairs and helped set up the couch. Before going to bed, we decided to play a quick game of Madden. I had never been good at the game, and as expected, he completely destroyed me. I laughed it off and told him I was too tired for another round. My head was spinning from the alcohol, and all I wanted was to sleep before the inevitable hangover got worse. Cody went upstairs, closed the basement door behind him, and left me alone in the darkness. The basement wasn't completely pitch black. Small lights provided just enough visibility to make out shapes. The digital clock from the cable box glowed faintly beneath the television. The standby light on the TV emitted a soft red dot. On the opposite side of the room, Cody kept a small Heineken mini fridge, which gave off a faint green glow. The refrigerator also produced a quiet humming noise that oddly helped me relax. I fell asleep quickly. At some point later in the night, I woke up unexpectedly. The room was still dark, and I had no idea what time it was. Judging by the silence and darkness, it had to be somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning. My mouth felt painfully dry. The alcohol had left me severely dehydrated. I could barely move my tongue without discomfort. I realized I hadn't brought any water downstairs before going to sleep. The thought of walking upstairs felt exhausting, so I tried ignoring the thirst at first. I rolled onto my side and glanced toward the mini fridge, hoping maybe there was a water bottle inside. But I already knew it only contained beer. Then, for reasons I still can't explain, my eyes drifted toward the far corner of the basement. At first, I thought my vision was playing tricks on me. I noticed what looked like a dark shape standing in the corner. I blinked several times, waiting for my eyes to adjust better to the darkness. I assumed it was a coat rack or some random object I hadn't noticed earlier. But the longer I stared, the more I realized the shape wasn't static. It was moving. The realization hit me like ice water running through my veins. There was a person standing in the corner of the basement. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to panic, but somehow I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't recognize the silhouette, and judging by the height alone, it definitely wasn't Cody. The tension in that moment was unbearable. My mind raced, trying to figure out how to escape without provoking whoever was watching me. After what felt like several minutes, I slowly sat up on the couch and let out a fake yawn. I stretched my arms and pretended to talk to myself, mumbling complaints about forgetting to bring water downstairs. I wanted to appear completely unaware of the figure. My plan was simple: act normal, walk upstairs casually, and get help. I stood up and slowly walked toward the staircase. Unfortunately, that meant walking closer to the figure. My heart pounded violently in my chest as I moved forward, expecting at any second to be grabbed from behind. When I reached the staircase, I turned slightly to step onto the first stair. I kept my movements natural and unhurried. Step by step, I began climbing upward. I resisted every urge to sprint. About halfway up the stairs, curiosity, or maybe pure survival instinct, forced me to glance back down. The figure was no longer in the corner. It was standing at the bottom of the stairs. That was all the confirmation I needed. Panic exploded inside me. I nearly tripped as I sprinted up the remaining steps. I slammed the basement door shut behind me and bolted upstairs to Cody's bedroom. I burst into his room and shook him awake, yelling that someone was in the basement. Before he could even process what I was saying, we both heard a loud slam from downstairs. I shouted, "You hear that?" Cody immediately jumped out of bed. We ran to his parents' room and woke his father, who reacted instantly. Without asking questions, he rushed downstairs toward the basement while yelling for Cody to call the police. As Cody dialed emergency services, we noticed something alarming. The basement door, the same door I had slammed shut moments earlier, was now wide open. That detail alone confirmed this wasn't a misunderstanding. While Cody spoke to the operator, his father searched the basement. When he returned, he told us the back door of the house was also open. Whoever had been in the basement had escaped through it. The three of us searched the backyard, the front yard, and even neighboring properties while Cody continued explaining the situation over the phone. Those 15 minutes waiting for the police felt surreal. I was fully sober by that point, running on pure adrenaline and fear. When officers finally arrived, they conducted a thorough search of the house and surrounding area. They documented everything and took statements from each of us. By then, several neighbors had woken up and stepped outside, asking if everything was okay. All I wanted at that point was to go home. I felt shaken and completely drained. After speaking briefly with Cody and his parents, I called an Uber. Cody offered to drive me home, but I refused. I just wanted to be alone. For a while after that night, I worried about them. The idea that someone had been inside their house without their knowledge was terrifying. I still visited Cody's place for gatherings, but something about that basement never felt the same again. Every time I went downstairs afterward, my eyes instinctively drifted toward that corner of the room. The same corner where I first saw that unmoving black silhouette. And every time I remembered the moment I realized it wasn't just a shadow. It was someone watching me sleep. My childhood home never really felt like a typical family house. Not in the way most people describe theirs, at least. My father traveled constantly for work, and my mother was rarely home either. She was always out with friends, staying with relatives, or busy with something that kept her away until late at night, sometimes not coming home at all. It might sound harsh to say, but I wasn't exactly abandoned. It was more like I was simply left alone most of the time. By the time I was 16, I had basically learned how to live independently inside that house. I ate dinner by myself almost every night. I watched TV alone. Some weekends, I wouldn't see another person inside of the house for 2 or 3 days straight. I was an only child, and I sometimes felt like my parents realized how much they valued their freedom after having me. Looking back now as an adult, I understand how that affected me emotionally. But as a teenager, I actually loved it. It felt like I had my own mansion without paying for it. I could invite friends over, stay up playing games, and talk to girls on the phone without worrying about my parents overhearing anything. Because I spent so much time alone there, I knew every sound that house made. It was an older, larger home with wooden floors and long hallways that naturally creaked and shifted. But those sounds never scared me. I was used to them. I used to joke that the house had personality. One particular night stands out clearly in my memory. My father was out of town for work, and my mother had planned to stay overnight at my aunt's house because of a family gathering the next day. She told me earlier that afternoon, "You'll be alone tonight." I barely reacted. That was completely normal for me. That evening was quiet and routine. I made myself dinner, watched TV downstairs, and eventually went upstairs around 11 to relax in my bedroom. My room was located at the end of the hallway on the second floor. At the top of the staircase, there was a small landing. To the right was my parents' bedroom. Farther down the hallway were the bathroom, a linen closet, and finally my room. I usually kept my bedroom door open at night. My parents always encouraged it, saying it helped stay alert in case of intruders. Personally, I liked hearing the natural background noise of the house. It made the loneliness feel less overwhelming. I spent about an hour watching YouTube videos in bed before closing my laptop. I then laid there scrolling through my phone, slowly getting tired. Maybe another hour passed before my phone suddenly rang. The screen showed no caller ID. It was the first time I had ever received a call like that. I stared at the screen, feeling uneasy. Receiving anonymous calls late at night felt suspicious. I ignored it at first, but seconds later it rang again with the same message. That made me answer. When I picked up, there was complete silence. At first, I assumed it was one of those scam calls designed to verify active phone numbers. But then I heard something faint in the background. It sounded like a television playing quietly. That detail immediately unsettled me because I had left the TV downstairs running earlier for background noise. As I listened carefully, my stomach tightened. The audio I was hearing through the phone matched exactly what was playing on my TV downstairs. Every word, every sound effect, every pause, perfectly synchronized. A cold wave of fear ran through me. The only explanation that made sense was horrifying. Whoever was calling me could hear my television in real time. That meant they were inside my house. I tried forcing myself to think logically. Maybe someone was outside one of the windows playing a prank. Maybe it was some weird audio glitch through my phone's microphone. But the longer I listened, the less believable those explanations became. I slowly stood up and walked toward my bedroom door, listening carefully. I could still hear the TV downstairs, and it matched perfectly with the sound on the phone. Without thinking, I shouted, "Who's down there?" The call immediately disconnected. My mouth went dry. I stepped into the hallway and approached the staircase. I could still hear the TV playing in the living room below. Then I heard a creak. It sounded like wooden floorboards shifting under someone's weight. If that wasn't enough, seconds later I heard someone clearing their throat downstairs. At that moment, reality hit me fully. This was not a prank or a glitch. I quickly returned to my bedroom, closed the door quietly, and unlocked it. My heart pounded uncontrollably. I started wondering if maybe my father was testing how I would react during a home intrusion. It sounded like something he might do. I grabbed my phone and called him repeatedly, but he didn't answer. It was nearly midnight and he was probably asleep. Next, I called my uncle who lived in the same town. He answered on the second ring, clearly half asleep. I warned him that what I was about to say would sound crazy, then asked if he was inside my house. He sounded confused and slightly amused, saying that sounded more like something my father would do. While I was still talking to him, my phone vibrated again. The screen displayed no caller ID once more. I begged my uncle to stay on the line while I answered the second call. When I picked up, there was silence again. This time, I didn't hear the TV audio. Instead, I heard footsteps through the phone speaker. At the exact same moment, I heard footsteps approaching outside my bedroom. Then my doorknob began to shake. Whoever was outside tried pushing the door open, but thankfully the old lock held strong. I could hear the same movement through the phone. The intruder knocked softly on my door. In pure desperation, I merged the two calls and screamed into the phone, telling my uncle it wasn't my father and begging him to come immediately. I also shouted that the intruder was on the line with us. My uncle instantly woke up fully and began yelling threats into the phone. The anonymous caller hung up immediately, and I heard footsteps running away from my door. My uncle told me to stay inside the room while he drove over. Even though he lived nearby, those few minutes felt endless. I sat there in complete silence, terrified to move. Finally, I heard my uncle shouting from downstairs. Relief washed over me. I rushed out of my room and met him. Together, we called the police while searching the house. The living room TV was still running. Eventually, we found the kitchen window fully open, wide enough for someone to climb through. When the police arrived, they conducted a full search of the house. The intruder was gone. They asked to see my call history. One officer explained that even anonymous calls could sometimes be traced through phone records. A few days later, they contacted me with surprising information. The number was traced back to someone I knew from high school. He wasn't a close friend or enemy, just an acquaintance who had my number and likely knew where I lived. The police asked if I wanted to accompany them while they questioned him. My uncle and I agreed. When we arrived at the house, the boy's father answered the door and immediately called his son downstairs after saying the officers. The moment the guy appeared, I could see nervousness on his face. When asked about the calls, he denied everything. He claimed his phone had been stolen at a party days earlier and that he never bothered reporting it because he planned to replace it anyway. There was no confession, no arrest, nothing. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about his expression. Was it guilt or simply fear of police involvement? If his phone truly had been stolen, that meant someone else used it to call me while breaking into my house. Somehow, that possibility felt even more disturbing. Owning my own place had always been my biggest dream. Ever since my high school years, I desperately wanted to move out. Growing up in my parents' house was far from ideal. My father drank heavily every weekend and arguments between us were constant. My mother wasn't much easier to live with either. The house felt tense and uncomfortable most of the time. As I got older and started dating, living there became even more embarrassing. There was absolutely no way I could bring a girl back to that environment. So the moment I had the opportunity, I left. At 19, while attending a commuter college close to home, I began searching obsessively for rentals. Since my parents refused to help pay for me to move away, I spent hours scrolling through Zillow, Facebook Marketplace, and Craigslist. Eventually, I found a small apartment that looked affordable and promising. I went to see it immediately. The layout was simple but practical. When you walked in, you entered an open living room and dining area. The kitchen was connected but separated by a partial wall. A hallway led toward the single bedroom with 2 closets along the way. One I later used as a pantry and the other for storage. Across from those closets was the bathroom. At the end of the hallway sat the bedroom, which was surprisingly spacious. It easily fit a queen-sized bed, 2 dressers, and a TV. It even had 2 additional closets. I was sold instantly, especially because the rent was within my budget. I signed the lease and moved in the following month. For the first few months, life felt peaceful and exciting. One night, I went out with friends and ran into a group of girls we knew. I ended up bringing one of them back to my apartment. I'll call her Sammy. We had known each other casually through school, but had never really spent time alone together before. We spent the night drinking and watching movies. Nothing serious happened. She wasn't comfortable taking things further, and I respected that. Eventually, we moved into the bedroom to finish the movie and ended up passing out, still slightly drunk. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. The room was dark. I reached beside me and noticed Sammy wasn't in bed anymore. I jumped up and looked down the hallway. I saw her quietly gathering her things in the living room. She was clearly trying to slip out to avoid awkward morning conversations. I understood completely, so I stayed silent and went back to bed. Shortly after, I heard the front door open and close. Just to confirm, I called out her name softly. No answer. I assumed she had left, and I drifted back to sleep. About an hour later, I woke up suddenly to a loud noise. My heart started racing immediately. I called Sammy's name again, but there was still no response. Fear began creeping in, but I didn't want to get out of bed yet. Instead, I grabbed my phone and texted Sammy, asking if she was still inside the apartment. It felt like a strange thing to do, but I was genuinely scared. My bedroom door was still open since I hadn't bothered to close it earlier. I was still a little intoxicated, but as I stared toward the doorway, I felt like I saw something wrapped around the door frame. My breathing became shallow and fast. I slowly pulled down my phone's control panel and turned on the flashlight while keeping the beam pointed at the doorway. That was when I realized what I was seeing. 2 hands were gripping the door frame. The moment the light revealed them, the hands tightened and instantly disappeared behind the wall. For 3 seconds, I was frozen in silence. Then I exploded into screams. I yelled repeatedly for whoever was there to get out. I finally forced myself out of bed and looked down the hallway. It appeared empty. I quickly flipped on the hallway light. After standing there trying to calm my breathing and listen for movement, I gathered enough courage to check the closets and bathroom. All empty. Next, I moved into the living room. There were almost no hiding spots there. I held my phone in front of me like it was a weapon while creeping toward the light switch. When the lights turned on, I felt slightly safer. The kitchen was the last place left. I slowly approached it and turned on that light too. The entire apartment was now illuminated. There was no one there. I checked behind furniture, under tables, even inside lower kitchen cabinets. Everything was clear. I rushed to the front door and locked it. That's when something strange hit me. I never remembered hearing the front door close after Sammy left. Panicked, I began calling Sammy repeatedly until she finally answered. She sounded half asleep and confused. I asked if she had come back into my apartment. She told me she had left a long time ago because she couldn't sleep. I didn't explain anything. I just apologized and hung up. I called my best friend next, spamming him until he answered. I explained everything. He told me I was probably still drunk and had experienced a waking hallucination. Honestly, it made some sense. I had been drinking heavily, and the missing sound of the front door supported that theory. Eventually, I calmed down enough to laugh it off. I locked my bedroom door and fell back asleep. The next morning, I searched the entire apartment again. Nothing was disturbed, no signs of forced entry. Everything seemed normal. I went about my day trying to forget the incident. Later that afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I walked back to my bedroom and examined the door frame where I thought I had seen those hands. My heart nearly stopped. There were visible fingerprints exactly where the hands had been gripping the frame. I felt dizzy realizing it hadn't been a hallucination. I took a picture of the prints, which I still have saved in my cloud storage years later. I ended up calling my dad for advice. Instead of comfort, he basically called me an idiot for not locking my door. But he wasn't wrong. Nothing had been stolen, and whoever had been inside was gone. He told me to treat it as a hard lesson learned. To this day, I have no idea who entered my apartment that night or why they chose to simply watch me in the creepiest way possible. But when my 1-year lease ended, I moved into a new apartment and never looked back.